The Nun was a movie I was really interested to see, as I was a big fan of the first two Conjuring movies, like a huge fan. Heck, I even liked the third one quite a bit. So when I found out they made a movie about the nun from The Conjuring 2, who was easily the best villain in that series, I was quite excited. However, excitement quickly turned into a somewhat masochistic interest when I saw the film's extremely poor critic and audience scores across the internet. When I saw that critics hated it, and even most of the audience did too, I just had to watch it and find out if it was yet another example of critics being too harsh and looking down upon a perfectly good horror movie, or if they were indeed correct this time around. Well, one thing I can say in favor of the movie is that the visuals are top-notch. Everything looks amazing, and the atmosphere of the Haunted Abbey is phenomenal, especially in the first 30 minutes. There are tons of shots that just made me go, wow. In addition to this, the actors do a pretty good job with what they're given. Taissa Farmiga, who was great in The Final Girls, plays a likable, if basic and forgettable main character, and Demian Bashir is alright as a priest who's trying to uncover the mystery of a nun who hanged herself in an abbey in Romania. However, we already must dive into the negative side here, as the other main character, known mainly as Frenchie, is pretty annoying, mainly due to the fact that he gets spooked while leaving the abbey, then after what feels like half an hour, shows up again for one scene, and then comes back to the abbey to save the other two characters. This is really stupid since he already got attacked by a demonic entity on his way out of the abbey. Would he not think to, I don't know, maybe get them the hell out of there while he still could? We also have more minor characters at the Abbey, mainly the nuns who live there. They act kind of robotic and aren't very interesting or likable, which really hurts the movie in my opinion. The Conjuring did a great job of not only having Ed and Lorraine Warren be likable and strong characters, but also the people that they helped out, especially in the second one. In that movie, a great bond is established between the family and the Warrens. This movie doesn't have that, and the characters coming into the Abbey aren't that interesting or great either, so it really relies on a great plot to work as a narrative, since the characters let it down. Does it at least deliver on that? No. The plot is essentially that a nun hangs herself, so they go to the Abbey, a bunch of creepy stuff happens there as they realize there's a demonic entity in it, and then they suit up and defeat the entity. It's simple, and I suppose it could work fine enough, but a lot of holes in this already thin and unambitious plot just end up tearing it to shreds. First, we have the scene of the priest falling into the coffin. This scene is meant to be really tense and scary as he's buried alive and calling out for help. I like that they set up the bells being rung by those buried alive from the times of the plague beforehand and used it here, but the fact that Taissa Farmiga's character immediately knows that one specific bell ringing is the priest makes no sense, especially considering the wind would be blowing all over, making at least a few other bells ring too. And in general, the actions of the characters never feel natural or methodical. They are always in service of moving the plot along. It isn't exactly contrivance, but it makes things feel so much less interesting, dramatic, or even human. Like how when the priest is freed from the coffin, he immediately sees some books in there and then wants to use them in his investigation. It seems incredibly forced that someone who was just buried alive, nearly stabbed in the head, and attacked by a demon would not even take a breather before going back into the haunted abbey to read some old books. And the priest is also meant to have some kind of trauma about a young boy who he couldn't save before, but it's used so sporadically and not fleshed out enough to the point that it just doesn't work. It feels like they're desperately trying to develop the characters more, but they just throw some idea they came up with for a backstory at the wall and never commit to actually good characters. This is made even worse by the fact that after the nun attacks the main character and they all know that they need to stop her, Taissa Farmiga's character decides to finally take her vows and become a nun. Really? An evil force set on killing you all and doing... Well, actually, we don't really ever find out the motivations of the nun, which is good, I suppose. But it doesn't make any sense for them to do this right now. I suppose it doesn't matter because the plot convenience allows them to do it without issue, but it's just so dumb regardless. If they did it after defeating the nun, it would be so much better because it would be sort of a satisfying ending, but instead it's forced in there at a pivotal moment. And the finale just solidifies this movie as some true garbage. It feels very convoluted and just all over the place, as does most of the film. Having these three characters all doing something at once and confusingly just disappearing all of a sudden makes it really hard to get invested. It's just not well structured and it becomes really hard to keep track of what the hell is even going on. But the real issue is the last scene, where the nun as a villain is totally ruined. Throughout the movie, there are very few scares, and most of them suck because they don't really lead to any real threat and are predictable as all hell. But a lot of the quote-unquote creepy stuff that happens is just the nun standing in a hallway, which gets old quick. But God, I wish they just kept her standing in that hallway for the finale, because in the last part, she picks up a shotgun, talks like a high school bully to the French dude, and then gets this groan-worthy comeback from him before being killed.
You should have kept running when you had the chance, Frenchman.
I'm French-Canadian.
Like, what did I just watch? The nun carrying a shotgun. Plus, the effects of her dying look kinda stupid too, which is just the cherry on top of this "it's definitely chocolate and not something else" sundae. This movie is an example of what I'd like to call the Anakin effect, where you take a beloved character and ruin them to some extent by exploring them way too deeply and removing all of their ambiguity. Examples include Darth Vader, who was ruined by being shown as a stupid, annoying kid, Boba Fett, who was ruined by being shown as an angry, bald old man who looks like he's constipated while fighting, and Michael Myers, who was ruined by them trying to make him the pawn of a cult. The nun is just like all of these guys, a great and mysterious villain ruined by no longer being mysterious at all. Take a look at how Creep 2 built upon its fascinating villain while still keeping him very mysterious and unpredictable, and then compare it to this garbage fire. It's night and day. I love a good horror movie, and though I typically enjoy the more serious ones, I can get behind a fun crowd pleaser like the Conjuring movies any day, but The Nun is an absolute embarrassment that is boring, ridiculous, stupid, at times nonsensical, and feels like it was written either by a 17-year-old intern who watched The Conjuring 2 while high, or by a robot. This movie is the worst thing the Catholic Church has ever been involved in. 1.5 out of 5. Oh, wait a minute.